Well, we're again back. Last time we just had a sort of the thing that we wanted to just see within a loose theme of Iqbal in the background. We try to see how the alternate way of trying to just develop an empirical method which is not at loggerheads with the notion of metaphysics, taking two referents, one Immanuel Kant and another Imam Ghazali, even though they have been centuries apart. So, but I just somehow rushed with the conclusive part of it with taking logic as the important theme, logic as an endeavor or logic as an instrument in the methodology of both Imam Ghazali and Immanuel Kant, and how Iqbal tries to see their ways in trying to see the limitations of reason or reaching to the conclusion that metaphysics is not possible. So you can so the end point of it was that within a logic, the way logic has developed posterior to Kant, also the way and this sort of things we have studied in analytical philosophy in 20th century, that logic and ontology and metaphysics, they do not necessarily intersect in that sense. And there has been an alternate viewpoint, which I try to emphasize, which was more in the theme of Imam Ghazali, and thereof that the sharp dividing line between logic ontology and metaphysics is no longer tenable. So I just refer to something called model logic, which is developed for metaphysical systems only. So even though people like Bertrand Russell have been they critiqued model logic in the nipping bud in the starting of 19th century, but later people like Kripke and others, they have had alternate model logical systems. So there can be prayers which exploring different logical systems, having different metaphysical systems. So the ontology or the being, the groundedness of the being, if I use the Western epistemology, the constructs of Western epistemology, but if we just placate them or conflate them vis-a-vis those medieval discourses, which had starting from Imam Ghazali, Ibn Sina, prior to it, Ibn Hazm, or later Razi and Sadruddin Shirazi, Tusi. So there's a whole to it. So how we can embed logic in the scheme of logic in that scheme of ontology and in the scheme of metaphysics, or we call it Ilahiyaat in that sense. So what we are going to see in today's lecture is we are trying to just conflate these two alternate ways of looking at logical systems, maybe in favor of trying to see that metaphysics makes this ontology and ontology possible. Metaphysics and ontology and language and logic, they can form one consistent, coherent whole where you can place things. Even though the metaphysical systems we place them in, they may not necessarily be in conformity with the way people from analytical philosophy will want to see things. So if you want to relate it with the transcontinental philosophy, you can do that way. Or we will, the mode of lecture in today's would be, we will try to conflate, or we will try to see these logical systems parallelly. One is Aristotelian logical system, which was later developed by Ibn Sina and post-Aristotelian logic, but it was grounded in a metaphysical tradition, which where metaphysics, theology, logic, knowledge, reason, and all the sciences, they were in the thing. While in the case, the other way, the way syllogistic reasoning, post-syllogistic reasoning, if we trace the history of logic from 12th, 13th century to medieval logic, you have before the coming of symbolic logic, you had the logic of Morgan, and you had the logic of Leibniz, how he tried to arithmetically logicize algebraic systems, and which was taken by Boole and Morgan. And there's also a logical system of Peirce, and later how in 19th century the epitome, the Russell Whitehead, this program of logicism, or Frege, Russell, Whitehead, this entire thing. So you can say these if syllogistic reasoning, maybe not only syllogistic reasoning of Aristotle, so you can also have the reasoning, the logic which was developed by Stoics. So in case of Stoics, so if you have for example, in the syllogism, you have a major premise and you have a minor premise, and you have a apodictic statement. You reach to a conclusivity of a statement from two or more statements. And those statements, if you go to Imam Ghazali, they can be empirically driven or non-empirically driven. And we can have those judgments, whether judgments are allowed, not allowed, mubah, and whatever the whole procedure to it. And you can have also a Kantian logic, or I have missed also one on the dialectical logic in the late 19th century of Hegel or Marx. So we can say, so we can also conflate, we can also see syllogistic reasoning in the background of an Stoic logic, where it's not that the primal statements they are hard and they are well written statements which cannot be changed, but those statements can also be continuously changed, or with there is a scope of trying to modify the primitive statements accordingly. So if you see medieval logicians, whether we are Christian theologians or Muslim theologians or Jewish these things, so you can see all of them are trying to just use syllogistic reasoning to their own to further their own arguments. The point I want to mention is that the syllogistic reasoning, which was the way, for example, if Carnap says there is no connection between logic, ontology, and metaphysics, a conclusion he derived in the 19th century, or Kripke in the recent terms says that there is no sharp distinction between logic and metaphysics, two viewpoints. So it leads to, if I use the formulation or one of the authors, the anatomy of knowledge and ontological necessity of first principles is required. And that ontology of necessity of first principle which is required can be, if you want to ground them in the medieval metaphysical traditions, they may be Kalam traditions, or they may be traditions of we call Marifa or Gnosis or Mahiya. So we can, the ontology and essences, how we can ground them in these, whether it's a post-Akbarian tradition or whether it's a post-Avicenenian tradition, and where I can use sort of before what I am trying to see, I just try to figure out what is something called modal logic. So modal logic, if I just use the term, modal logic is a kind of logic Here we can just see the possibility of metaphysics, prior metaphysical systems, which can relate these to these logical systems, which will not make the exclusivity of ontology and metaphysics necessary. We can have those systems. So moral logic is a kind of logic, I just said, used to represent statements about necessity and possibilities. So we can say it plays a role in the concept of knowledge and obligation and causation. So we can have, for example, if there are necessary truths, there can be contingent truths, and in the when we have these metaphysical systems, or when we have a syllogistic reasoning, these model syllogistic statements have been in the, if you just see post Avicenenian construction also. So in those statements, syllogistic reasonings, once a statement which can be, if it temporally evolves in time, those statements can either give the conclusion of those statements can be affirmative or they can be negative in definite sense. But if one of those statements they have a teleology or there's a temporal part of it, it can lead to certain statements which lie between possibility and probability, you can say, in that sense. Either the statement can be possible, or it can be possible not in one world, or it can be possible in the many worlds. So you can restrict that statement in that sense. So we come to at the end what I'm trying to say, but here I would also want to place whatever I have said, so that this entire discourse may turn out. We can place it so that we can just connect the threads later. But here is a statement of Wittgenstein in Tractus Logicus, where he says, so you can have early Wittgenstein, the way you can have early Russell and later Russell, you can have early Wittgenstein and later Wittgenstein. So before writing Tractus, or if you read Russell's the logic of so I don't remember the name of the book, so just a statement of Wittgenstein, what he says: logic pervades the world, the limits of the world are also its limits. So we cannot say in logic the world has in it and this, but not that, for that would appear to presuppose that we are excluding certain possibilities, and this cannot be the case, since world would require that logic should go beyond the limits of the world. For in that way could it view that those limits from other side as well. So we cannot think what we cannot think. So what we cannot think, we cannot say either. Or later, what he says, what we cannot ask in precise terms, that must pass through silence. So you can say logic, the preponderance of logic as a tool, making it a self-contained system, leads to an exclusion of a possibility where the metaphysical notions cannot be, what I should say, cannot be even taken from the start. So they are excluded per se. This is the you can say with the coming of Principia, the state of our knowledge, how it was. So even though maybe later Wittgenstein just says that ultimately logical statements are language games ultimately, or tautologies in that sense, but we are just trying to place whatever we have said. So whatever I said, so we are just trying to ground these syllogistic logic of Aristotelian reasoning, how it was taken whether by medieval theologians or whether it was taken by later, how things developed in the symbolic logic. In the previous, the former case, you can ground metaphysics, logic, and ontology in some sense, while in case of the later, they can be exclusive to each other. So, but how we can see it? So we have to see it. We have to ground it in the famous debates, which I tried to previously in the Iqbalian background. We try to see how reason and revelation can be seen in that sense. The way Iqbal wants to see give revelation a prior thing, even though there can be interesting convergences or intersections between a part of revelation has part of rational element into it, but it's an interesting it's the most profound topics in that sense. So even though maybe the scope of Ibn Sina and Farabi was to just see the harmony of reason and revelation within the New Platonic school. And even though we can have in medieval times, maybe the Ghazalian time, the role of syllogism was mostly legal syllogism and the rational syllogism. So you can have three classes. One is proof, demonstrative, whether it's dialectical or rhetorical. So you can have to see where these things can be applied. And you can also see how Modalities brought these methods of dialectical reasoning, which were derived from Christian fathers, from pagan Greeks, to organize a theology and defend it against attack from within and without Islam. So this is the background. You can see how this syllogistic reasoning post Aristotle had you can have accepted those different elements. So even though Imam Ghazali said that logic, even though if you read history, you can say Imam Ghazali took logic as important, but seeing the limitations of philosophy in arriving at, so he took recourse to mysticism, but with a pinch of salt in that sense. So in the Ghazalian systems provides a conclusive confirmation of truth of revelation, but it must always be rooted and trained and under the control of trained reason. So in that sense, being, which is the 20th century term, in that sense, but you can say we normally talk of being. Maybe it's a universal of all properties of metaphysics, which coincides with ontology. It's the most primordial of all possible determinants. It nevertheless clearly determines, and so it's a sort of a determination, and every determination is limitless, at which a metaphysical viewpoint cannot stop. So being can never become supreme metaphysical principle. So it's also in the post-analytical philosophy, whether Allah Heidegger or Allah maybe the thing, how we can just see relationships of ontology and metaphysics and logic and language. So you can say if we want to really ground medieval discourses or medieval this logic and ontology and being, so you have to so being is not an fundamental category. If I use the Kant's category, if I use it's a category, so you can say it also is somewhat limiting in that sense. So to treat metaphysics as a branch of philosophy is profound misunderstanding of its scope and character of universality. So the point is, when we purport to go beyond logic, we have to, and so in the problem, a lot of people, for example, Western philosophical system, for example, it's strange blend of logic and metaphysics. Even though when it purports to go beyond logic, it may lead to some pseudo metaphysical fantasies. So if I will again just take Kant in that picture, for him the philosophy has remained negative as it not an instrument of extending knowledge, as that of a discipline which limiting it, or in that sense is metaphysics possible. So if you say Kantian think that things in themselves which constitute noumena were unknowable. So metaphysically, an attempt to gain knowledge beyond phenomenal reality was an impossibility. So you, in Kantian scheme of things, you always have things in itself and things as part of some relational thing. So you cannot things in themselves don't have any thing in that context. So you have two categories. One is being, which is limited in some sense. One is Kant's notion of thing as it is, or things in themselves, which are not allowed. So both these definitions seem to be inappropriate, or they are limiting in the sense the way medieval theologians, or if you want to continue that discourse, where you want to make logic, ontology, and philosophy or metaphysics, metaphysics in the possible. So you can resurrect these notions in that sense. So you can use notions of divine unity and divine uniqueness in that sense. So you can say so you have previously I just at the end quoted two statements, two just quotations maybe from Ibn Arabi and Imam Razi, that one is that extra mental perceptions, whether they extra mental particulars, whether they are universal statements, whether they correspond to some inner being in that sense. So the point is that in the Islamic, in the medieval discourses, the notion of nafs al-amr as a prime being or prime human self, which recognizes those and extra mental particulars in that sense. So for them, for example, being, essence, individuation, unity and multiplicity, moral operators, and the ontological basis and causality, namely questions traditionally treated in are components in the post-Razian Kalam discourses. So true statements about these non-empirical entities have no reference in extra mental particulars or kharij. Yet they represent the most fundamental ingredients of all human knowledge, the way medieval theologians constructed it, or medieval epistemologists try to see them within the notions of what I should quiddity, Mahiya, the essence and the existence, how they form a unified whole, a syncretic whole, harmonious whole, and most basic truths and yes. So you can so in this notion of nafs al-amr, you can have it is in the nature of order of things that homology or henology. Henology means if something is created in some accidentally in certain sense, and ontology should have primacy over epistemology. So the being, the existence, being and existence not in the Heidegger's sense partly, but that is also to be grounded in some ontology which is prior to something, a priori ontology in that sense, in that modal sense. Yes, a priori ontology, and which has a primary, which has primacy over epistemology in that sense. Yes. So you can say whether it's Avicenenian or Kalam or Platonic or Akbarian tradition which it should be capable of effectively responding to subjectivistic, anti-metaphysical viewpoints of the nature and the knowledge. So the anti-metaphysical viewpoints may be that of the human discourse skepticism, Kantian thing against metaphysics, and the various intellectual trends which have been existing post Kant, whether it's what existentialism, whether it's all the sorts of discourses which are inspired from these intellectual trends, or intellectual trends which are inspired by these post-Kantian discourses, which are against those existence of those prior relationship between forms and realities, the existence of realities, whether they are eternally existing platonic forms or the existence of creator or Allah who makes the existence of these forms possible ex nihilo. So we can say true entities are now provisionally called accidents, mawjudat. So this is the point. So you can say in that sense we are faced with various traditions, whether it's materialistic tradition, rationalistic tradition, superficialist tradition. So what the Islamic tradition is affiliated with those methods, particularly in the domain of so if I just we're going to somehow what I should say, this interesting relationship between, because medieval discourses have been, if we want to really pin down post Aristotelian syllogistic reasoning, whether in Avicenenian tradition or when we invoke modal logics, modal thing in the Aristotelian reasoning. But you have to all of them see that those are debates which are rooted in linguistics and logic, as well as grammar. You can see it that way. So where role of Ibn Taymiyyah becomes important, because he was if you see Ibn Rushd was strong, what I should say, apologetic or strong converter to the Aristotelian way of looking at things. Even the way the renditions of Imam Ghazali, or making amends to make to just critique Greek scholastics, including Aristotle, Plato, and others. So Ibn Rushd tried to defend in all manner of the word in that sense. So against Ibn Rushd, you can see Ibn Taymiyyah, who just showed that for when we try to apply those universals, abstract universals, so Aristotelian logic seems to be misfit in that sense. So he pointed out holes in the syllogistic reasoning of Aristotle, maybe from legal arguments, or from taking an empirical metaphysics in that sense. So you cannot find empirical particulars or irrepressible. Yes, that's the thing. So there can be relationships between Arabic grammar and linguistics in that sense, if you want to see that way. So one strong standpoint believes that linguistics has gone beyond grammar, therefore later cannot be discarded. And the other standpoint sees grammar as sufficient, and it rejects the need for linguistics. So maybe you can have the thing is that since there have been strong schools of grammar and logic, grammar in the medieval times, and they had been very rigorous in it. So all sorts of discourses with balagha, grammar, linguistic, logic, jurisprudence in that sense. So if we want to say, for example, formal language can go through two distinct stages. One is the stage of construction, where grammatical expressions are used, and a stage of coordinations where logical expressions are used. So you can say existence and quiddity or marifa are two entities when considered logically and ontologically. So existence is the first aspect of quiddity and also called by Ibn Kamil. So he used the word al-kulli al-tabi. Or there are various, for example, there can be various logics. One is mental logic, one is empirical logic, one is in the same way there can be universals, various universals, kulli tabi. So you can say how existences and essences can be seen. And in that sense, how we can see necessary existence and contingent existences. And there you can see, for example, if a statement is there, for example, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal. From this you can say that Socrates is mortal. But the statement is somewhat frozen in time. It's a word and this thing. Socrates is a man and Socrates are no. So if a statement which has a temporal order attached to it, something is moving, and if it is moving, for example, it changes its color once it's moving. So if for example, if something is moving and it changes color once it's moving, so which color it changes once it's moving? It can change many colors. So you can have either we can have open-ended statements from these syllogistic reasonings, which can have two or more statements, which can be empirically or non-empirically driven, or there can be various syllogisms to the effect, whether it's conjunctive syllogism, distinctive syllogism, and whether. So you can have rules which syllogistic reasoning is accordingly being constructed. So the point is, in case of once we have this modal logic, where you keep it as an open possibility and necessity. So you have a contingent existence and necessary existence between being of the God and the being of the world. So so there can be many worlds, and in that world in which we are living, it's existing. But there can be many worlds in which you are not existing, or the possibility of God existing in all the God existence, the existence. There can be many worlds, and you living in a particular world in that sense, and your existence can be contingent to you being in that living in that world. So existence, you can explain it whether existence you do existence exist in the necessary. One is necessary existence, the other is the contingent existence. So if I just use the argument of mini world view of quantum physics, where you say that in which world you are living, you are saying that there can be all possible worlds, and in the act of observation chooses the world in which you are living. So prior to existing, the possibility of existing and the existence, prior to your existence in a particular world, you can have there's a possibility you can live in all the worlds. The moment you choose to just prove whether you are living in that world, you live in that world. So in that sense, you can say whether the possibility of open-ended statements can be explored in that sense, and how that can make the existence of logical prayers possible. And from that, how we can see metaphysics, logic, language, the meaning of words, and how we can see to them. And there can be open-ended sentences. So the way Russell has written logic of atomic forms, how we can construct sentences and how we can impose rules of grammar to them. So you can see whether we can simultaneously upgrade the linguistic, because sometimes the world is too. So if I just quote the way when Iqbal says, the poetic expressions. So the existence of poetic expressions, they can be means world can be whether words are sufficient to crystallize the mosaic, the meaning of words, whether a given situation or a given phenomenon out there, can it be, what I should say, symbolically, cryptically enclosed in that mosaic of words, and how those words, the rules we are using them, how we can construct different worlds. And if the worlds, whether if we are living in the Wittgensteinian world, it's finite world, we cannot go beyond that world in that sense. So question is whether meaning goes outside the word or not. So this is a different debate. So Nicole, so you can say that. So in this sense, we can say logic can be used to represent statements about necessity and possibility in that sense. So you can say these words, the logic which can be framed can have connections with law, can have connections with theology, can have connections with grammar, rhetoric, or balaga, and you can say it that way. This is the way Arab logic developed in medieval times, and in that sense, the modern logic was seen. For example, the characteristics of a modal logic to relating characteristics of a mode or manner of a grammar of a verb. So you can, so in the, for example, in the scheme of, if I just use the word, an Arab logical historian Nicholson Reiner, famously in his developments of Arab logic. So he says there can be five just universals. One is genus, species, differentia, proprium, general accident. But you can have subject, predicate, copula, and judgment. So you can, people who are in linguistics, they can better understand these things. So maybe the work of Giorgiani is one of the maybe linguistics, 11th century probably. So whose work clearly exhibits changing emphasis of logicians away from the formal technicalities of model and hypothetical logic towards the in-depth discussions of philosophical and semantic issues raised in the earlier parts of standard books of logic. So we can say, so any language or words, they cannot be forced in a certain era, because the words and the meanings, they get expands or they get changed from the perspective of observer, or how linguistics can trace the evolution of language in different eras, and what remains constant or what changes in that sense, and whether there are rules of these things we see in terms of how we construct grammar, and whether grammar and language, the close and logic, and grammar is in turn related with logic, how it seems. And you can see glosses and counter glosses, which are dealt with semantic, philosophical, and theological issues. For example, there has been this Qutbuddin Razi, you can say. So in the medieval logicians, the way we have Liar's paradox and other. So there have been, for example, Liar's paradox. There's a book written by this Ahmad Farandi, Taftazani. So these issues have been dealt. The point I want to emphasize is, in modern time, there's something called polemicists. So you develop some discourses, and the other people take on those. So next generation, they take on those things. There are some things which are left they are left as in questions for future scholars. So the way medieval discourses just developed, it was towards that thing, to keep logic, ontology, metaphysics grounded in some sense, in something called Ilahiyaat in that sense. So against this, for example, if I want to conflate it with, for example, Carnap, which I just initially used, that his statement that the logical syntax of language, they are logic and ontology cannot be. So if I use another word, Tarski, who expresses doubts about Carnap's analytic synthetic distinction, but only as it applies to mathematics. So if you take a road to modern logic, maybe road to modern logic normally is taken from 1850 to 1950, where we have first order logic in that sense. And you can say, for example, so the Aristotelian syllogistic reasoning, which was developed, so you can see whether it was hypothetic or deductive syllogism, you can say in the 19th century. So it was grounded in not only calculus of propositions, calculus of classes. So the point I want to say is that so without going into whether what Russell's theory of types are, or what I should say, which tried to, for example, in the analytical school, Russell's logicism, where you try to reduce all of mathematics to logic, or even arithmetical statements to logic, the way Frege tried to see it, and the way in the Russell's theory of types want to rescue logicism in some sense from its contradictions in that sense, and whole school to it. So here I want to introduce mention that Imam Ghazali also introduced a novel point about logic, initiated without arithmeticizing, and that in later day formal logicians like Tarski, Wittgenstein, namely empirical truth is contingent truth in some possible worlds, unlike deductive truth, which is true in all possible worlds. So the thing is, again, you can just see how you can see modern logic in that sense. So the contingency statements and the statements which can be true, which are definitive in that sense. So you can say, but the only thing is that Imam Ghazali would use, they spoke of possible worlds Allah can create. While so used the possible worlds can be created by Allah or creator, while Wittgenstein, Tarski, formal semantics, one speaks of possible logical worlds. So you can only speak of logical worlds. So whatever can be said, it has to be said in words. What cannot be said in words. So the logic should be all, and if at all we have to express things about the world, it should be logical in that sense. Yes. So here again to mention the point, how we can later develop a modality of things in that those statements. As compared to how Kant would want to see. Logic does not depend upon how things are. It's independent of considerations of existence. So this is the way Kant's way of looking. So I'm basically conflating these two viewpoints, basically to come to see role of logic can be seen both ways. It can either be seen in the post-Kantian discourses, the Aristotelian logic has, or the analytical school, it's exclusive to that of ontology and metaphysics in that sense. While in case of medieval post-Avicenenian logic, if I use modal logic in that sense, and in the recent terms of Kripke and these people, they have tried to not necessarily logic cannot necessarily be exclusive to ontology and metaphysics. And if you want to make one further addition, is that you can ground these logic and metaphysics not to a skewed definition of metaphysics, which is delimiting. in that sense. If you invoke Allah or Creator, who is creating these all possible worlds in that sense. Yes. So if I used this is a famous article written by Jules Ferroris. He says, for example, mathematical logic is what logic was for 25 centuries and few transformations what it has become today. They were not merely questions of detail, but involve fundamental change in conception of logic and delimitation of scope. Delimitation of scope in the sense, maybe I'm just slightly digressing, that the way Kant will try to show limitations of metaphysics, Gödel's result in mathematics or first order logic. The statements we cannot the formalization of certain arithmetical statements is not possible. Those are also some limitations which are imposed in some sense. In that sense, this last things can be. So you can say whatever all I have said. So there is a famous essay of Carnap in that sense. The elimination of metaphysics through the logical analysis of language. That's so how you just see words and sentences in the logic of atomic sentences. You can say it. So it is opposed to what Islamic philosophy, to Muslim philosophy or Arab philosophy, or if you want to put it in terms of theosophy, or what in the previous lecture I tried to talk about theologic in that sense. So the current view does not contest the assessment of logic and philosophy so much as to insist on the superiority of Islamic philosophy in poetical, mystical, and religious area of Islam. So even though current day study will take medieval these discourses of logic, language, language and literature, but only in poetic and mystical things. They will not the logic part of it, how it's being grounded in those discourses. It's not talked in that sense. So where you can also include debates of Farabi and Ibn Sina regarding logic, grammar, and language. Maybe some languages are more suitable for certain things, and some are less suitable. And to have a cosmopolitan approach of creating a language where you can take the best languages or best suitable elements from different languages and from different cultures, or coming together and making a transnational or cosmopolitan thing out of it. In that sense, you can see it that way also. And one thing which I want to again emphasize is that if syllogistic reason logic is the logic where we can have inferences from two or more premises to reach a conclusion. Maybe if we'll just try to see Avicenen's Ibn Sina's syllogistic model differs from Aristotelian thing by including explicit semantics, by dealing with temporal modalities along with athletic modalities, means modalities of logical necessity, contingency, possibility, and impossibility. Means once we have in the syllogistic Aristotelian reasoning, you have one or two more sentences to reach something, to reach a conclusion. So in those statements, you can have you can also include explicit semantics by dealing with temporal modalities, statements which are evolving in time, which are also called elethetic modalities, which includes maybe terms of logical necessity. Maybe necessity is included, the contingency is included, the possibility is included, as well as impossibility is included. So this what I today's this thing lecture, whatever I had tried to show, it was, so maybe I was not convinced in that some sense that how we can see development of a scientific method post which Iqbal was not fundamentally comfortable with. He wanted to incorporate in the empirical elements of Quran, modulo the atheistic and other elements, Aristotelian elements in that sense. So in the process, he wanted to recast or rescue metaphysics in some sense. So we have tried to show the whole chronology of it, trying to conflate post-Aristotelian syllogistic reasoning, how medieval theologians have tried to see it in the discourses they had developed, and in the theology and in the metaphysics. Maybe metaphysics they have used their own words like Ilahiyaat. So you can so how in the hierarchy of sciences how it all developed, this the reasoning, the logic, or even the invocation of Imam Ghazali's logic not being alien or not being something different from a Quranic way of looking at things, the effects it had on jurisprudence and whole school in that sense. So maybe there can be, now I'll just read some of the sentences from this book. Maybe this was a bit sort of background of it, so which I'll try to there are, maybe I'll just choose some sentences from Iqbalian this thing to make sense of today whatever I have said. For example, Iqbal says deep in so again, universe is so constituted that it is capable of extension. God adds to his creation as he wills. It's not a block universe, a finished product, immobile and incapable of change. Deep in the inner being lies perhaps the dream of new birth. Say so through the earth and see how God hath brought forth all creation. Hereafter will he give it another birth. So we can, so even though this statement is some general sense, we can create the attributes of the creator. But you can say, if I just say the metaphysics is or ontology or being is a delimiting term, so you can use the open possibilities of how God as a creator creates the possibilities and open possibilities, and here he's a creator of all possibilities, and the possibilities which exist, it's the world. So he can create possibilities. It's not that in the Aristotelian scheme world is eternal and God can be eternal also, and can maintain perpetuity of eternity of creator with the eternity of the universe. It's the contingency and existences, the prior existences and the contingent existences, which can be made possible via modal logic in some logical sense or in general sense. So here the Quran would say, go through the earth and see how God had brought all creation. Hereafter will he give birth to, give it another birth. So the existences of worlds, new worlds, and many worlds, it's all possibilities. And he also says it's knowledge that establishes these connections, and knowledge is sense perception elaborated by understanding. So maybe here Iqbal is not just, we have basically concentrated on logic, but here he is trying to say sense perception elaborated by understanding. So that's it. For example, again he says, the intellectual effort to overcome the abstraction offered by it, besides enriching and amplifying our life, sharpens our insight and thus prepares us for a more masterful insertion into the subtler aspects of human experience. It's our reflective contact with the temporal fluxes of things which trains us for intellectual vision of the non-temporal. So what is temporally evolving? So all the contingent possibilities, the temporality which is associated with the logical constructions or the mentations we can see of the world. So ultimately you can see beneath if this everything is changing. So there's a particular quotation of Ibn Arabi where he says, for example, I've written somewhere here. Maybe I just say. Okay, leave it. So I will be some minutes. That is, what was the universe, or Augustinian statement? What was God doing before the universe was created? So he was the same God, and and he's the same God when the universe got created. So the thing is that a realization that beneath that contingencies, beneath that temporality, beneath that causal, beneath that those extra mental particulars, they should have correspondence in that innate self, nafsal amar, which corresponds to that creator, the ontology of being, which is being created by that prior creator. It can be realized by that way. So the cultures of Asia, and in fact of whole ancient world, failed because they approached reality exclusively from within and moved from within outwards. The procedure gave them theory without power on mere theory, nor durable civilization. So here you can say there may be Iqbal's way of looking at things is he was also interested in the way part of social realities. So excessively going for this mystical pantheon, so you lead to the sort of actionlessness. So his realization has both elements of action and realization part of it. In the process of realizing things beyond matter, he doesn't deny matter in that sense. So maybe the thing, for example, where he says the naturalism of Quran is only a recognition of the fact that man is related to nature, and this relation, in view of its possibility as a means of controlling her forces, must be exploited in the interests not of unrighteous desire for domination, but in the nobler spirit of free upward movement of spiritual life. Again, so if the Kantian or the post-Kantian or analytical school of Russell or empiricism, radical empiricism of Mill, and skepticism of Hume, and the denial of metaphysics of Kant, the way Western, so in the process they only just lead to an attitude which has belief in now, materiality of this world only, the presence. Because when the metaphysics is gone, so your thing. So maybe Iqbal is somewhat also trying to be repellent. He wants to have a balance between the two. So in the interests of securing a complete vision of reality, therefore, sense perception must be supplemented by a perception of what Quran calls as Faud or Qalb, that is heart. So now Iqbal, so in the sense which I was in the previous lectures, we are saying maybe Iqbal was not totally giving us the way if scientific method, moral law, positivism and materialism has to be subtracted, and you have to see Quranic method, but how to go, how to reach there. So here Iqbal is trying to somehow give us a sort of answer also. He is trying to just develop the case for, you can say, revelation, or you can say religion, or you can say qalb, or that mystical elements, or Faud or qalb or wahi or Wajdaan. So you can have different words can be, so to arrive at it. So what is rational and what's revelation? So what part of rational is part of revelation? A part of revelation has a part of rationality element in it, and part of rationality has a revelational element in it, or you can say henothetic element. So suddenly a sort of huds is attached to it, hoods. So but the point is that here Iqbal is trying to come up with a In it, there's also a message of how to develop a balance between material and non-material, metaphysics and rational or material, and trying to have a course correction in that sense. So maybe we'll stop here. In the next lecture, we are going to see how he develops what the Quran calls Faud or Qalb, how Iqbal may be forwarding the arguments towards the same. Though maybe today's lecture was a bit slightly off the track, in the sense that how linguistics, logic, and metaphysics and ontology, how they may not be necessarily be exclusive. But in the next lecture, the main point is how this Faud or Qalb or revelation or Wajdaan, also how Iqbal tries to forward the argumentation in the coming lectures. We hope you might have liked it, or you may like it, whatever I have just tried to say it. Thanks for listening.